Not the comic. It is a TV series. Welcome everyone to the Heroes World Quarantine Podcast. I'm your host, Stupe. With me today are the owners and proprietors of Heroes World, John and Andre. Please say hello.
Hello.
Avasti scallywags.
Yes, Yarg.
Yarg.
I guess
So confused as to where that came out of.
Yordrick is a pirate name, although I would say it's more like a yield knight. You know, like if
It's Yorick, not Yordrick. Why are you throwing a D in?
I like to throw it around.
Throw a D around?
In the TV show, I think they call them two different names in the TV show, which it is what it is, because Diane Lane calls, or the aide to Diane, it's like York needs money, and so he calls him short form and long form. The sister calls him long form. Anyways,
what's happening?
We're also joined by a resident prince of mischief. He is, as many people affectionately have called him, the Barry Judd of the podcast. Those who know who that is, Rob is trying to think, who's Barry Judd? Do you know who that is?
No, I don't. Is it Ashley Judd's brother? I don't have
no
idea.
That is the character Jack Black in the movie High Fidelity, the guy that works at the record store who just stayed there all day, every day, and just ended up working there. So.
Yeah, it's true, because I've actually been sitting on this Zoom meeting. I just generally just throw on a new shirt and I just sit here and wait for you guys to come back on to do new episodes. I don't do shit. So I've just been sitting here since last Sunday. I'm really glad you guys showed up.
Yeah. Right. He's been waiting diligently till the Zoom activates again.
Yeah, I was waiting. Once I hear that this meeting's recording, I'm like, oh my God, they're here. And I get all excited.
So welcome everyone to our review of episode 1 of Why the Last Man, a very anticipated but yet highly troubled TV series that has gone through many changes, acting differences, replacements, and of course being filmed in our backyard, our neck of the woods in Toronto. Based off a book that I originally read, and Heroes World got me really on board years ago, Why the Last Man. And it is written, of course, by Brian K. Vaughan. It was released, the original one was 2002, September, and it wrapped up in March of 2008. So we're just going to talk about the TV series, because the book, which Andre has in the background, I think that's is that the full edition with all the bells and whistles?
No, this is the absolute edition. So it's 3 volumes, all 60 issues, but almost 20 issues per book. Fantastic iteration, because you get to see it in a larger format, and Pia Guerrero, who does the art, just fantastic on the series. The two things work really well together, the art and the writing for this.
Perfect.
AKA Big Mamma Jamma edition. You can ask for it at Heroes World.
And available to pick up at Heroes World. So Why the Last Man, of course, is I'll briefly go through the summary, and then I'll get everyone's thoughts. Why the Last Man is essentially, it takes place in the year of our Lord 2002. It is a scenario where something has happened where every animal on the planet with the Y chromosome has suddenly died all at the same time. Chaos is ensuing, accidents, a bunch of things, everything that is involving men of the Y chromosome has died, and it's left the remnants of everyone else to deal with the ramifications and see what happens, except for one person, and his pet monkey has survived. So that is
David Schwimmer.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Maurice the monkey and Yorick, as I like to call him, Yorick Brown, who is an amateur escape artist. He is the only survivor, and he is the only hope, and it shows his story and how he's navigating the world as the last man. So John, you, myself, and Andre have a history of this book. We know a little bit of it. I know you read some of it in the beginning. After watching episode 1, what are your thoughts? What are your feelings after watching the first episode?
Yeah, it's been a while. So apologies if I kind of don't remember the comic book correctly. But so we only watched the first episode. Sorry, Stu, I don't remember if you stated that. So I only went 1 episode deep.
Yeah, we got 1 episode. Yep.
Yeah. So based off that first episode, and and all the characters we saw, there's definitely some characters that I didn't recognize. So I don't know if they've added characters. I think Andre will probably be able to go a little in depth because I believe he has reread this recently. But I did actually enjoy the introduction of all these new characters and things like that. Like I really am liking this cast. Like it's a lot of familiar faces. The casting of, I think, York's mother, who's the senator,
Diane Lane.
Diane Lane, is bang
Superman's
on.
wife. Superman's
like
mom,
as soon as I saw her, I kind of instantly remembered that character in the comics. So bang on for whoever called that casting, and all the other you'll notice a lot of the male leads don't get or the male characters don't get a lot of attention because don't get too attached to them. But all the female actors or the actors or actresses, however you want to call them, they were all interesting to me. Like especially Agent 355. Very, very cool. I like that she really looked like she could handle herself. I do like her introduction, which I believe is very different from the comic book. But it was a cool insight into that she can kind of be this chameleon, this undercover type character. So I'm really looking forward to seeing more of her. The character I like the least is actually the Last Man himself. I could take him or leave him right now, especially in this first episode. He's not very likable. So I don't know if that was their intention. When I read the comic, if I'm remembering correctly, he was a main centerpiece in that first issue. You do see a lot of him. You get to know him. I don't think he's as like, I don't know what you would call it, as broke ass in the comic book. I think he's got things going on. So maybe they just want to kind of flip this character a little bit and put him in the pits or something like that. But he definitely seemed like a much more likable character in the comic book because I remember actually rooting for him. Or maybe I'm just mad that Topher Grace is not playing this part. If we could go in the Wayback Time Machine, but hopefully later on the episodes maybe they're just doing like a little bit of setup. But I as far as a first episode in a genre that maybe is not my jam, like I typically like to watch the action shows or like light on the thinking, heavy on the the action and things doing. I did get caught by this. I did find it intriguing, and the way they start when the dominoes start tumbling towards the end and all the characters, all the Y chromosome characters just start dropping. It did catch me, so I will watch more episodes of this. I don't know if that's part of the question or not, but
yeah. Well, we'll get to it. That's fine.
So it did catch me. Yeah. Aside from York not being like, if he didn't appear in this first episode, I probably would have been fine. So,
Andre, what are your thoughts?
I think we should go to Rob next. Save me for last.
Just go. What do you mean?
Because I don't want to spoil. Let's.
He's got a lot of the comic knowledge.
Yeah, I've got a lot of stuff to say, and I don't want to hear. I don't want to color what Rob has to say. So I would say Rob, go.
So I have not read any of this series. We just discussed this before we started recording. This was, I've said it before, I took a huge amount of time of reading comics away from reading comics. So this fell into that period. So I'm coming at it from a guy who's never, just very much like Sweet Tooth. I didn't read the source material and I watched that show. And so I'd be very interested at the end of this episode to have that dialogue with you guys with respect to, comparing it to Sweet Tooth and the changes that it's made. So that being said, I have watched the first 3 episodes. They are on FX Canada. In reviewing though this episode of number 1, I found it to be a little bit confusing at the beginning. I found I just thought it was, there was no real introduction to who these people were, like what their names were. Yeah. And so Yorick's sister, I actually thought that her name was Beth. I didn't realize, they don't actually mention her name, I don't believe, in this first episode. You find out that it's Hero. But I sent a text to Stu and I erroneously said Beth, but I said Hero is actually probably the luckiest woman in the world because she has probably the last person on the face of the earth to have sex with a man and then kills him and then can get away with it because all the men died all within 5 minutes. And so I was like, hey, at that point, go buy a lottery ticket if they're still running lotteries because you've congratulations, you've done the impossible. There are moments where it's kind of funny. I kind of agree with what John is saying. York as the actor. I was like, I didn't really get it. He's okay. But again, I'm coming from the point of like, I don't really know the source material, so I have nothing to base it on. So he's okay from what we're seeing, although you don't really see a lot of him in this first episode. I'm happy that they didn't take 7 episodes to get into the world building of what we're dealing with. It really is at the end of the first episode, it's all the cards are on the table, leading you into the next 9 episodes as to, okay, this I don't know, pandemic or whatever it is has happened. And again, it's one of these weird shows. It's like, hey, we're currently in a pandemic, and obviously, fictionalizes a lot worse than what we're dealing with. But okay, it's another show where something happens and it's upended the world. So, all in all, it's okay. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it enough that it propelled me to watch the next 2 episodes. And so, if you are like me who have not read the books, and you're kind of not sure, I think you'll enjoy episode 2 and 3. Will it be appointment viewing for you on a weekly basis? I don't know. For me, I'm on the fence. I could just wait until the remaining 6 episodes are out, so then I can just binge it, or 7 episodes. I think it looks good. It doesn't look cheap. It doesn't look. I think it's directed well. The dialogue's okay. Overall, it's an okay episode. But again, it was enough that it kind of hooked me to propel me to watch the next 2.
Andre, your thoughts on the episode, not on the story, not on the books. Go.
My thoughts on the episode, but not on the books.
Well, tell us your thoughts on just what are your thoughts on this episode 1? Because we'll go into like thoughts of the book afterwards.
Okay.
Because they're 2 separate things, right?
Oh yeah,
they are, but one's based on the book, so I don't know how I separate them. Okay, Diane Lane was good.
Mm-hmm.
The show, like Rob said, looked good. I would say that the pacing was off on the show. I think it was very boring at times. Could have been explained better, and it introduced a lot of characters that weren't in the book, and I think it introduced a lot of it spent time on stuff that I thought was ultimately irrelevant going forward. I didn't watch the other 2 like Rob, but yeah, I guess that's what I'd like to say. I would like to do a comparison with like I would like to explain why I think these things, but I think it's a very interesting premise, and it's interesting that my first impression when the credit scene was going, I'm like, oh, Brian K. Vaughan and Pia Guerrera have I think executive producer credit. So I'm like, oh, this is good. The original creators are on this. Yeah. And then after watching the episode, I'm like, well, that was a token giving, because this is they might as well not call it Why the Last Man in my opinion for this first episode. So please give me the time to go into it after, because I have a lot to say, and I think it would, if I talk about it, Rob will get what I'm saying, and John might.
We're gonna go in a second.
Yeah. I just
in case some people are just watching the show and don't want it spoiled.
I will say though that and this is not a spoiler for the next 2 episodes, but I will say that of the 3 episodes, all of them have been written and directed by women. I think it's a very important. Because that may, how do I say this without coming across as being a sexist, but that may change the POV of the source material because it's being written by a woman, and which is fine. Like I think that's good. I would have liked to have. I'm glad that it's written by women, because so far in this episode 1, the majority is a POV of the women's world as opposed to a typical man world, right? So
yeah, and to that standpoint, it's an excellent opportunity for. Every extra is a woman. Every actress in the show is a woman. So there is ample opportunity to give opportunities for actresses of all different colors and backgrounds. Because even when you hire a background person, it's like, we need a couple people and it's a guy here, a guy there. This one is very particular. It's like, we can only have women. So this is what we're going to do. So it's going to
obviously after first episode though, right? So we haven't seen that second episode.
Yeah. So once you get further in the show, it's going to be
landscape. Yeah.
So I'm sure the Toronto cast calls already happened already, because again, as I joked with Rob about before the podcast started, it's like, I can't get my mind off of like downtown Toronto. It's like whatever it's supposed to be New York. And then I'm looking at it, I'm like, oh yeah, it's Bay, or that's Adelaide or whatever. So it is what it is. So John, after episode 1, are you going to recommend other people watch this show and carry forward?
Yeah, just based off episode
Yep.
1, you know, expectations of the comic, like again, I haven't read the comic in a long time. So and maybe, you know, having it in TV form is a neat way to kind of re-experience that. But when we get to Andre later, we'll see what the big differences were. Yeah, I think you should at least check it out. This is something new, and especially what you guys are talking about, episode 2, this kicks off. Like, I don't know if you can think of anything else in the genre that would flip a switch like that, where it's going to have only one male cast member, and who knows who's behind the scenes and stuff like that. So that's an interesting thing to see, even if you just maybe tune in for episode 2 just to see if you notice. And
a score out of 10, what are you giving it?
Episode 1, like it's very introductory, like Andre said. They introduce like a ton of characters, and I had trouble discerning which ones I remembered from the comic, which ones are not. So they don't cover a ton of ground. So I'd probably give it a 7.
Rob, what do you?
Yeah. So I would say, like, I enjoyed it. You know, despite its, you know, as Andre said, its pacing flaws or whatever, though, its storytelling, its lack of real introduction of who these characters are. But enough that after episode 3, I kind of want to go back and rewatch number 1, because now that I know what the names are. So yes, I recommend people watch it. I recommend people stick with it. And I'm going to give it like a 7.5. I think it was a solid pilot episode. So,
Andre?
Yeah. So, my score is going to be colored by the fact that I literally just reread this series. And of course it's based on it. So I can't, you know, I can't give it points on the first episode, you know, kind of for originality without thinking about what I know. So I'm going to say a 5 out of 10. Again, partly because of the changes. So keep that in mind. I do think that, you know, like I said, the acting and the sets and stuff was good. So that's where it's going to get points for me for the 5. Where it loses those 5 points are on plot and storytelling in this first episode. So I'll get to that. But it's I do think that if you watch the trailer or know anything, I do think it is worth a watch. But I definitely from this first episode know that I think that the book, like most often, the books just happen to be better, and I think this is going to be the same case for this series.
Okay, and that is all of that. So now we're gonna go full spoilers into the comparison of books and whatnot. So if you want to continue to watch the continue, go for it. But if you want to not be spoiled by things that are happening ahead, please understand at this point we're gonna go full.
Well, maybe I should leave.
I don't think Andre's not going to reveal the ending or anything like that.
No.
He's just going to compare it. Yeah.
But even then, it's like even I know enough that the comparables are often going to shift the narrative of the.
But then
show.
maybe you should be comparing it after the show is over then. Because how do you?
I'll only make comparisons to the first 2 comic books. Okay.
Like, so
I'm interested to hear, because it's been a while since I read it.
So yeah, we'll put the parameters in place. Rob doesn't want to be spoiled. So Andre, we'll give you the floor, because John and Rob have nothing. So go for it.
Okay. So you know, Stu did a great job doing this the summary of the book, and like I said, I am just rereading this also with a group of 2 friends that have never read it before, so it's really nice to get their fresh take on it. So there's a couple really, I want to say, huge jarring differences that this first episode made that are in like the first 5 pages of the comic book. And I think a couple of them for me make me question whether or not the powers that be were interested in adapting this, or they're just using just the looseness of the premise in order to tell a story. So I'll go with the biggest, the first one, and this goes to the pacing. When you read the comic book, you're introduced to the character. You start with Yorick Brown, and he's talking to Beth on the phone, and Beth is already in Australia.
Yep.
Okay. And he is talking to her, and and stuff. And then you meet over the phone, you then meet his mother, who's the senator, or she's a congresswoman in the comic book.
Yep.
And then you flash over, you meet a character called Dr. Elizabeth Mann, and she's getting rushed to a hospital, and she's in labor, and she's getting, pushed in and stuff like that. Yep. And then you meet 355. She's in another country, and you meet a very interesting character called Alter, who is a female Israeli operative.
Yep.
Okay, so you meet all these characters in rapid succession very early. And as the show kind of drags out and we see animals dying over different periods of time, it looks like it takes a course of 3 days for this to happen. Literally, the comic book has these events. They're like, you see Yorick, and then you see 45 minutes before the event, then half an hour before the event, then an hour before, or like 20 minutes. And they're showing what each of these characters are doing. Sorry, you also meet Hero too. So those are kind of established, the first 5 or 6 characters. But the moment when basically shit hits the fan is right at the moment where Yorick is going to ask the question. Elizabeth Mann is screaming with labor pains and something else. So you get the succession, even though you're reading a comic, that this is a countdown and it all happens and every man dies, or everything with Y dies at the same time. And it's almost like right when that child is birthed. So you're like, whoa, what the heck is going on? Now, why is this, in my opinion, like so kind of wrong? Well, the TV show took, again, what seemed like 3 days to do it. To me, Yorick's motivation in the comic is one based purely on affection and love. The person who understands him the most and that he loves the most in the world is a world away, and they get cut off for the phone call. And he's like, well, I don't care that everybody's dead here. I got to get from New York to Australia. That's my quest. I need to find my love.
True love. Yeah.
And in this, Beth's a totally different character, right? Beth's not even in Australia. So right away, Yorick, to me's motivation, his quest is gone. You don't need him. Done. You have made that part absolutely irrelevant.
Yep.
Right. 355's introduction, while similar to show that she's a capable agent, she works for a group that is kind of has some, shall we say, different motivations than just being a secret service or a spy. And it implies something kind of supernatural, or something that is kind of like a relic in what she's going on. So they've totally glossed over that, which again shows a potential to why this catastrophe happens, and they've glossed over that. Hero's character is kind of a free spirit. She's bad luck with men, but she's found this guy that she really seems to love. She does not kill this guy. He just dies. So I don't understand the change in the focus of what they have drawn in for these people's lives. Like, we've gotten more information about like Yorick being broke ass. That wasn't, we knew he didn't have a job, but we didn't know he was this destitute kind of.
He had jobs in the comic, but it never said that he was like, he could maneuver around New York, but
he
this
needed
one
money
makes him
for
seem
cheese.
like
he needed money to buy cheese.
Yeah, like it's like
he
made him seem really poor in this. But in the comic book, he was hustling, and you have to hustle in New York.
He was doing street magic if he needed to pay his bills and stuff, right? So we see
David
that, and I feel that they added all of these. I don't want to use the word nuance, but they put all this background information into these characters that does not need to be there, because most of the people that perpetrate that part of the story are going to be dead by the end of the episode, and they were. Case in point, Diane Lane's character, Senator Brown,
Jennifer Brown,
Senator Brown, she is maybe getting separated from her husband. So you waste all of 2-3 minutes going into that background for a character that's dead. In the comic book, when she talks to Yorick on the phone, she's like, oh, just remember it's your father's birthday. You might want to call him. And then Yorick feels bad that he didn't call his father, and then everybody's dead, right? We get to find out that Hero, again, I don't think in the comics she's sleeping with a married man, because her coworkers don't say anything and they catch them red-handed. And she, yes, it was by accident she killed somebody, but you're like, okay, what was the point of that? Then we get introduced to a brand new character who's a senatorial aide, or the president's aide, and has family issues and kid issues and stuff. 355, whole origins change. I'm like, okay, you spent all this time giving these characters like little, background stuff. Yet again, you don't never have to reference it going forward. Now, I don't know, Rob, if they do reference it in 2 or 3 or whatever, but I'm like, it's inconsequential if you've got 10 hours to tell this story.
I think they want to do a fake out. People are watching it because they don't know this.
So let me just jump in quickly, because as I said this before, is that when you cast an actress like Diane Lane, she's gonna want to do something, and I think that really hurt the show, because Amber Tamlin's character didn't exist in the comic books. There's Jennifer Campbell Cunningham, the daughter of the president, this whole thing. So you have to give her conflict. In the book, she's just kind of doing her own thing. She's like, there's enough chaos happening in Washington, D.C. that she doesn't need also another person to basically, who's a Republican, to fight her on stuff.
Yeah.
So you have to add meat, like any type of movie you watch, like, where's this? The actor signs on because there's something for them to do. You couldn't have gotten Diane Lane if it was just the character written as is, because there isn't much for her to do in season, in the beginning of it. So they had to add like this force of something for her to I guess resolve the rest of the season.
I don't know. I'm gonna disagree with that, because in the comic, they show her, to me, her great moment is when she is at the White House, and then the wives of the Republicans come and they're like, we want our husband's seats. That shows that turmoil. So I think what I'm trying to say is like the book,
but that's I feel
that's
like this,
literally on this in the second issue.
But Andre, you just said already that was resolved quickly.
It wasn't resolved quickly. They started it, but it was only resolved quickly because the story follows Yorick, whereas the first episode of this, Yorick is not the main character.
I have a feeling that
they could have given
Andre,
more meat. I understand what you're saying,
but like because you were saying before, like, why is it dragging out? I have the feeling that Amber Tamlin's character is not recurring. She's the main. This is going to be a full season arc of like them basically debating conflict
right.
in the series.
And I understand that. But again, like, did you guys watch season 1 of The Walking Dead?
Yeah.
Right? Do you remember Daryl's brother?
Yeah.
Right?
Yondu.
So they made
Merle.
a whole subplot in that story about him being like this super racist, right?
Yep.
And I'm like, okay, so there's not enough tension that it's the end of the world and it's the zombie apocalypse, but you have to put in a racist guy and how they have to deal with it. I'm like, that totally misses the rest of all the tension that you could interject into just surviving day to day. Like, I'm pretty sure, shouldn't say pretty sure, but I would like to hazard a guess that if it was the apocalypse and you were racist, but a person of color could help you survive, you might, for the sake of survival, play along. This show, for Why the Last Man, same thing. They start putting in other forces, I don't want to say they're artificial, but they are real forces, but it doesn't play in like the needs of the plot of what the story is ultimately about is greater than them putting those things in. So they fixate on, I don't want to say modern problems, but they fixate on issues of today that the book does tackle 20 years ago, but in what I want to say, a smarter manner. I don't want to go into them because I don't want to spoil it. But what I'm just trying to say is, in general, in that first episode, there's so much wasted that you only get to the end part of everything happening, but you saw that at the beginning of the first scene. And the way that the comic book plays it out, I think it's a harder hit. Do you know what I mean? Like, this went for the shock value of everybody dies in a pool of blood. The comic went for the kind of like horror and shock of a parent running out holding a child and saying, help me, my sons are dying, or something. So I just question how they read the book and got from
I
one
think,
thing
Andre,
to...
it speaks to the comfortability of Brian King Vaughn in terms of how much of the show he got greenlit. So if it was one thing where producer studio is gonna like, we back you, the whole series, we're gonna be done, don't worry about ratings, you would do it that way. But this one, it's like, we don't know if it's gonna survive. We have to kind of make the first episode really make an impact to get people to watch the show. And I feel like they missed that mark, because I'm not interested in going back.
And again,
so it's like one of those things where that's your pilot has to be the best
episode,
step forward. And I think the pacing of that first comic, again, I agree with you. It's the better way to do it. But it's a TV show. Like, you got to really get people, and they had to bring in stuff in, and it just...
But I think it's the wrong decision, because I don't know. I'm going to ask Rob, since he watched 2 and 3. Did they introduce the character of Elizabeth Mann?
Well, the character is referenced, and there is a conversation that does happen, but you don't physically see her yet.
Okay, so here's the thing: she is like integral, and I know it's only 3 episodes, so maybe they do get to it. But the whole book, the whole 60 issues is, you've put together your quest. You've got Yorick, the Last Man. You've got 355, the Protector, and you have potentially Dr. Mann, who could figure out what happened to men, and possibly because of her area of expertise, help propagate the extension of the species. Because if you don't have this, the world is destroyed. There's no coming back, because it doesn't matter how many women are alive at this moment. If there's no Y chromosome, right, you're done. You've got no more like anything. So they have to solve this. And for them to put the doctor character maybe by the 3rd episode, she's one of the key characters. So
let me just say, though, that I think this is where, though, I disagree with having to reference the comic book after the just one episode, because it's a different medium of storytelling.
Correct.
We don't know how many seasons this show has been greenlit. This is not a limited series. If they said, hey, it's a limited series, 10 episodes, we're telling the story and that's it, I would agree that by episode 3, based on what you're telling me, we should have already had an introduction to man, but that's not the case. This is being drawn out. Again, I've always said we can't, when you have adaptations, whether it's in a book or from a comic book, we can't always skew to the same pacing and storytelling method from the source material, because it has to be written and shot for a much broader audience, right? That's the reality, is that comic book reading is for a certain group of individuals. Television is a much broader audience and who it's trying to captivate and bring in to their show. So all the things that you're telling me that that weren't part of episode 1, a lot of this stuff is then addressed in some form or fashion in the following 2 episodes of 2 and 3. Maybe a bit different than the comic book, but it's enough that as a guy who's never read the comic, I'm still interested in. The changes that you're referencing, they don't upset me. I don't feel like I'm missing out on anything. And I think this is why, FX in Canada or Hulu in the US, that's why they dropped all 3 episodes at once, because I think it helps form the story. By the end of episode 3, what you've made a point, and I won't reference what exactly it was, but you made a point regarding 3 different, or at least 2 different characters on something. That is where we are towards the end of episode. Like, so things are happening. But this is where I think it does a bit of a disservice to you as a comic book reader and to the viewer by comparing beat for beat comic to pilot episode, because you can't have it matching.
No, I disagree. You can. They just chose a different direction.
But I think
that's fine. You can do what you want to do, because
but how is it, Rob? Like, literally, the what Yorick's motivating factor in the comic is that his wife is in, or the love of his life, his girlfriend is in Australia. And now she's just in New York. So you're telling me that Andre, even though they had their little fight, if he still felt that way, he'd be like, well, I'm just going to find her. So he would never have left he would never have been like, oh, I'm going to go to my mom in Washington because she can maybe help me get to thing. So I just don't understand how they sat in a writer's room and said, okay, yeah, we're going to change that. Beth is not going to be there.
It could be as simple as we don't have the money. We can't do Australia.
You could do Australia in a green screen or a.
Well, hang on, but again, but the problem is though, is that your argument and your point. It's difficult for me to counter that because you haven't seen episode 2 and 3. You don't know whether or not they have addressed Yorick's motivating factor to kind of match the comic. We also don't know. Yes. So Beth is not currently in Australia. It would be safe to assume that he still has a motivating factor to try to find her. And I think that is addressed, but it's also, this is something that will be used. You can foresee in future episodes. So just because she's not in Australia, her location doesn't have to diminish his motivating factor to find her.
So let's just okay. I think we both agree that, and also this was shot during COVID times, so there was a lot of different problems that transpired, like for example, or even difficulties in actors, because we knew that in this show there was a different agent 355 that was cast. It was basically 007. She was supposed to be in the role Captain Marvel. Captain Rambeau was supposed to be in it.
Monica Rambeau. Barry Keoghan was supposed to be Yorick. She's supposed to be Hero.
And then Timothy Hutton was supposed to be the president of Pilot, but then now Paul Gross instead. So there's a lot of different things that transpire that makes this show very different. Like I said, I'm gonna watch it eventually near the end, and we'll see what happens. But I think this is definitely, as we joked, a Toronto show, so they had a Toronto budget, and FX is like, we'll do it, but this is the way we're gonna pay for it. So, and again, maybe you paid a lot more money for Diane Lane, and that's the way it's going to be. So they had to,
but compared to Jupiter's Legacy, which was a Toronto show, I'm much more interested in continuing this story. That even though I finished Jupiter's Legacy, 100%. I'm much more interested in watching this show than I was ever having to revisit.
They don't have the janky costumes. That's the thing. Like they saved all that budget for the janky costumes, and they could do it on just broken cars instead. Because the most egregious thing with Jupiter Legacy was the costumes and the makeup. They had to make people look old. So we'll see what happens. Maybe all this money went to the monkey.
Maybe.
So
ampersand
the monkey. So nonetheless, I think Andre and I, who have read, will be interested to see how they make adjustments, because again, to Andre's point, a lot of that book first part was trying to find its way to Australia, and if she's like, I just got to go down the street to the Bronx, I don't know how that's gonna go, but we'll see. I was gonna say, Andre, do you recommend something to read? But yeah, you've already talked about Why the Last Man, the absolute edition, so
honestly, I think if anybody is watching the show, I think you have to read the book. Like, I know Rob's going to disagree, but it's like yes, is it not fair to judge something on the first episode? Yeah, it definitely isn't fair.
It is not fair.
But at the same time, you're calling it Why the Last Man, and it doesn't have the feel of Why the Last Man to me. It has the feel of a very cheap copy. And whether that's because of, Stu just mentioned a lot of changes and stuff like that, and budgetary concerns and constraints, well, it does a disservice to the story as a whole. And I think Brian K. Vaughan is not only is he a brilliant writer, but he's a brilliant character writer. And if you're reading any of his books like Saga, Ex Machina, you don't replace his characters. I can't think of anything that he's written that I would say, oh no, you could have done it better with a different character and stuff. So I would challenge whoever's writing and creating these other characters to have read the book, and they missed the nuance that the book had, I think. So if you do like it, I would highly recommend it. We've got all versions in the shop, from trade paperback to omnibus to the Absolutes edition. So definitely read it.
Gotcha. So, John, do you have anything to recommend outside of Why the Last Man?
Yeah, if you haven't read Saga, definitely jump onto Saga, and I think Andre's point of view is very interesting because it is, if you've read the book and you're going into the show expecting somewhat of a faithful adaptation, that now you know what to expect from Andre. And we've also got Rob's point of view, who's never read the book and is just looking at it as a new TV show. So you've got his point of view, and I'm kind of straddling the line in the middle, and it looks like Stu's leaning a little more towards Andre's side. So I think I like that we've got a little mix of everything in here. I know the guys got a little heated in there, but I think it is cool that they're actually making this. And let's not forget, Why the Last Man is a phenomenal book. So if you are making a TV series that maybe doesn't have a budget, like Stu is saying, budget like to recreate this phenomenal book, maybe we're getting just a little piece of it, and maybe it'll get people to read Why Last Man. So maybe if someone like Rob finishes watching and they're like, hey, I'm gonna go read the book now. So maybe this is one of those cases where you watch the TV show and then you go the flip side and then go back to the source material. So I think that's cool. But yeah, definitely, if you want to read something of this caliber and see what Andre's talking about is Brian K. Vaughan's characterization, definitely jump on to Saga, which hasn't been, maybe it has been announced for a TV project. I don't know, but it's not out right now. So maybe you want to keep your spoilers away from your Why Last Man. So you're going to go read something else from Brian K. Vaughan. So I definitely, one of my favorites is Saga. Ex Machina was actually a really good book. Andre mentioned that a lot of people forget that he did. So that's another one to definitely check out.
Yeah, I think to what Andre said before, they're doing deviations to the book. I don't mind doing deviations. I think this book, as we talked before, came out in 2002. There's going to be changes because they're not going to make it a period piece. They're probably going to do it the year 2020 instead of 2002. I'm fine with a lot of things if it suits the story, but I'm not fine with it when you have to basically do it because the actor or actress wants more work. But I'm making assumptions here. Maybe Diane Lane didn't want to do more, and they're like, well, we have this high caliber actress, we got to make her be able to do more, and
we're gonna throw more stuff at her.
Yeah, and I think this first, I watched all 3 episodes. There's a lot of like, I guess, an homage to the Handmaid's Tale, where they're like adding a lot of like real life allegory of political views and like adding it to the show to make it more relevant to today, which I totally understand, but I don't know if it's completely necessary. And I do like the inclusion of trans characters that, you know, have transitioned, but because they lack the Y chromosome, they are, you know, here, but they didn't die because of that. So, you know, kudos to the show and moving forward and having all the female casts and writers and directors. You know, I just, you know, I will give it a chance when it's all done, but I don't know if it's my full cup of tea. But let's find out and see what happens. Rob, what other I guess we'll just go as John opened up. What other Brian K. Vaughan stuff do you want to offer to the world, or what do you want?
You know, I think the easy one you could flip off, after, you know, if we're not going to do Saga, you could say Paper Girls, but I'm actually going to go with We Stand on Guard. So they did Brian K. Vaughan and Steve Scroce. They did, I think it's Scroce. Yeah, Scroce. They did like 6 issues, and essentially what it is that it's, you know, somewhat in the future, not a dystopian future, not too far removed from where we are now, but somewhere in the future, there is a lack of water, and the U.S. decides to invade Canada to try to get its water resources, and it becomes a bit of a battle and a war between the U.S. and Canada. And it's really cool. Again, you're in a, you know, it's, you know, in an unrecognizable world that, you know, it deals a lot with a lot of political discussions, especially around the capture of individuals and how we treat them, and what is a resource anymore, and why, just because Canada is, you know, the Great White North with a lot of snow, why do they get to have access to this supply of water as opposed to the rest of the world? And it's 6 issues. It was a really good run. I really enjoyed it. I think that there is a collected edition out now. I remember when I was picking up issue by issue at the store many years ago when it came out, which I guess maybe about 5 years ago, I was really intrigued by this, including some of the characters are French, and they're actually, all their dialogue is in French. It's not translated. So overall, I would say like this is like kind of
Brush up on your French.
That's right. But it's a really cool story. It's 6 issues, a collected edition, you know, is out there. And I would recommend going to the store and picking it up. I know like when I was there last time, I think you guys had the trades in or the trades. It's only, again, the one, but definitely go pick it out. It's a fun read. It's a cool read. And I'm glad that I picked it up issue to issue. And I do want to grab that, the collected edition so I can continue reading it again. So we stand on.
If you're Canadian, you should definitely pick it up.
Yeah, because it is pretty cool for Canadians to you know.
The moment you said Great White North, I have the Bob and Doug McKenzie.
Here we go.
The moment you said that, I'm like, I heard the chime in my head. John, Andre, where can we find you guys on the internets and in the desert of the real?
Yeah, so Heroes World Online on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, our website. That's the one key phrase you need to know, and that'll take you everywhere in there. Everything's updated there, all our new stuff. You can message us directly. We'll answer as quickly as possible and keep you up to date on these things. If you're listening on the audio Heroes World podcast on the iTunes, Spotify, definitely check us out. You can listen to us on the go, load it up on your phone while you're doing your morning run or rowing your boat or whatever you're going to do. Hanging about by the pool like Rob. You should put a boat in your pool and just chill. Anyways.
My pool's not that big, but okay.
John's like, Rob has enough for a yacht in his backyard, right?
Yeah,
a rowboat? Or are you talking about a dinghy?
What boat would you like, John? Yes.
Yeah, what's your definition?
Schooner?
Yeah. Is it you know, this is mad. This is exactly what happens in
when I was growing up.
Do you see the boat? It's not a boat, it's a schooner.
Yeah, they threw an old boat on a playground and it was like the greatest thing ever. They had to take it down later because it became, you know, a dangerous thing later on, but it's pretty funny when I think back. There was a beached boat basically in a playground and we would be able to go in and run around, play with the whatever, but that's funny.
Oh dear Lord. Andre,
hilarious when I think about it now.
It's some things are funny, haha, and some things are funny, strange. I'll let you.
It is when I think about it now. I'm like, literally, that was a beached boat, and we were just running around playing with the kids. And I guess it got so busted up that they had to take it away because it was a friggin' safety hazard.
Oh my god! All right, Andre, please save us.
The store is open 5 days a week. Warden and Highway 7. 8601 Warden Avenue. Lots of parking, lots of other things to do in the plaza. But hopefully we are the reason that you're coming because you want to check out all the new stuff. We get new stuff in all the time, from board games to miniature games, collectible card games, comic books, trade paperbacks, role-playing games, models, you name it, we've got it. Something for everybody at the store. And of course, John and myself, if you ever want to come and get recommendations or suggestions on a new hobby to come and check out or a new comic book or series to enjoy, that's what we're here for.
Rob?
So yes, tomorrow night, if you are listening live on the Heroes World Sidekick Show, 8 p.m. Eastern on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch, you would join normally John and I. However, John is not going to be around tomorrow night. He's off trying to determine how a beached boat would end up in a playground when he lived in an area that was landlocked and had no water. What he doesn't realize is somebody just built a stupid pirate ship and he thought it was real. So John will not be around. However, Stu is joining me, and tomorrow night we are discussing the 1995 Michael Mann movie Heat, starring Robert De Niro, Al Pacino, Tom Sizemore, and Val Kilmer's wonky elbow. So you definitely want to join us.
Ashley Judd.
Judd as well. Yes.
Danny Trejo.
Danny Trejo and
Natalie Portman.
That's right. Yes, a very young Natalie Portman.
Dennis Haysbert is in it as well, right?
Dennis Haysbert, is in
Love
it.
That president.
Amy Brenneman. Amy Brenneman's in there. If you want to go on that Judge show that she was on. So
Judging Amy.
Judge Amy. Yes, there's a whole litany of actors and actresses that you will recognize.
That's where Superman got his start. That's where Tom Welling got his big break on Chasing Amy.
Chasing Amy. No, Judging Amy, not Chasing Amy. Right. Just a different thing altogether. So definitely join Stu and I tomorrow as we discuss that. If you're thinking, oh man, I really kind of want to watch that movie, it's been a while, or I've never seen it. Hey, good news for you. It is on Amazon Prime. So if you're a subscriber to Amazon Prime, you can find it. If not, you can rent it for like pretty cheap. I think it's like $3. Or just buy it on iTunes. It was $14 for the 4K version. Let me just tell you, it looks fantastic. So
come with
tomorrow
night, commentary?
I don't know, John. I think so. Tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Eastern on YouTube, Facebook, or Twitch. Join us for the Heroes World Live Sidekick Show.
Thank you all for joining us. As always, if you can support the store, purchasing anything, big or small, is most welcome. If you are unable to, just based on geographical location, please like, subscribe, do what you can. If you are out of, for example, if you're in a foreign country and you're watching it, we know there are people doing that. Please like, subscribe, share. That helps us in just get the word out for people to discover the channel as well as discover the store live in Technicolor. So please, we are most thankful if you can do whatever you can and comment and let us know if Andre and me are dumb about Why the Last Man and you are all for this TV show.
If you're Team Rob,
like
let us know.
We like the Discord. We like the conversation. If you're Team Rob, and be like, Andre,
I think
you guys
it's
don't
good
know
to
anything.
show like what to expect if you're going in with certain expectations.
So nonetheless, buy the first trade, read it, tell us what you like, let us know your thoughts. You don't have to buy the entire thing, but buy the first trade at least. It's available at Heroes World and whatnot. So thank you much for joining us. Have a great day, and we'll see you soon. Bye.
Peace.